basically any Jewish person that believes the Old Testament would have to deny Jesus as Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
He'd have to just walk away and say, no, he couldn't. He could not believe in him as we present him, because basically the way the Christian Church presents Jesus is that he came to create a new religion, and that he called it Christianity. That he came to change the commandments of God, and that he did away with the old and he created something new.
Mm-hmm.
And any Jewish person, and actually anybody that knows the Old Testament and believes the Old Testament to be true, would have to just absolutely turn that person down and say, well, then I will not believe, and I cannot believe in this person because God told me not to.
Mm-hmm.
For the very reason, if you read in Deuteronomy chapter 13.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll read that to you.
Okay.
Chapter 13, Deuteronomy 1 through 5. If there arise among you a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, and gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or the wonder comes to pass, of which he spoke to you, and he says, let us go after other gods, which you have not known, and let us serve them. And think about this in respect to Yeshua coming to them. You shall not hearken unto the words of that prophet or that dreamer of dreams, for Yahweh your Elohim is testing you. To know whether you love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart and with all your soul. You shall walk after Yahweh your Elohim and fear him, and keep his commandments, and obey his voice, and you shall serve him and cleave unto him. And that prophet or that dreamer of dreams shall be put to death, because he has spoken to turn you away from Yahweh your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, and redeemed you out of the house of bondage, to thrust you out of the way which Yahweh your Elohim commanded you to walk in. So shall you put the evil away from the midst of you.
Mm-hmm.
So God is basically saying, don't believe this person. And the way that the Christian Church presents Jesus to people, to anybody, to any unbeliever, Jew or Gentile, these days, is Jesus came and he abolished the law. He put away. He's doing something new. He's doing something different.
Mm-hmm.
And they present him like he's sinned, basically, because if he's done that, then he has transgressed the commandments of God.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And we shouldn't believe him.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
Plain and simple.
It's interesting too, because you can look at those 5 verses and you can see what led up to the crucifixion
Exactly.
of Yeshua.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, they saw him somebody that was coming and preaching, for lack of better words, a different gospel.
Right.
And they knew that he had to die. And folks, the Jews didn't kill Jesus; the Romans did.
Right.
But yeah, you could see what led up to it, and what the elders of Israel thought at that time. I'm not saying that their actions were right, by any means, but you could see what their mindset was. Here you got a guy that's coming and presenting what looks like a different religion, and you have Deuteronomy chapter 13, 1 through 5, telling you that, no, you can't have this. And Yeshua even topped it off by saying that he was the I am, I'm the God. So
yeah, and the way this teaching today started was that, back in the days of Paul and Yeshua and everything, thousands and thousands of Jews believed on Yeshua.
Mm-hmm.
Thousands. And why is that not happening today? What are we doing different? Are we doing something wrong? Are we doing something completely different than Paul did? Are we doing something different than Yeshua did? And it really comes down to how we are presenting the gospel to people.
Right.
And when Yeshua was on the earth, he would say things like, against the law. And people assume, I think, that he's talking against the law of Moses.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not speaking against the law of Moses. He never speaks against the law of Moses. He never teaches against the law of Moses. If you read the word carefully, you'll see that. He's always speaking against the oral law.
Mm-hmm.
And when he, quote unquote, breaks the law, he's always breaking the law, the oral law.
Mm-hmm.
The traditions of men, the Pharisaical law, the Talmudic law.
Mm-hmm.
He's always breaking that law when he's walking through the wheat fields, and they're eating on the Sabbath, you know.
Mm-hmm.
When he heals on the Sabbath, when they eat without washing their hands. Those are all traditions of
Right.
the elders. They're, you know, those are things that the Pharisees have added to the law.
Mm-hmm.
And if you, and what's it say? What's the Bible say about adding to the law?
Well, I wouldn't want to be a person that did it because you're going to receive all the plagues out of the Bible.
And it says in Deuteronomy 12:32, whatever I command you, be careful to observe it. You shall not add to it nor take away from it.
Mm-hmm.
Or Deuteronomy 4, where is it? 4. I need it. Where is it? 4. It's 4:2, I believe. Where it says, I got it here somewhere. 4:2, I think. Somebody look it up. Deuteronomy 4:2.
I think I'm somebody.
Are you somebody? Okay. I might have it here too.
Hold on. Deuteronomy 4.
4:2. You shall not add unto the word which I command you, neither shall you take away from it, that you may keep the commandments of Yahweh your Elohim which I command you.
Right.
So obviously he's pretty sure that he doesn't want you to do that.
Mm-hmm. I think. Can I interject real quick, Kristen? Because I think you need to know what the oral law is.
Okay.
And
yes.
you know, being Christians, you know, a lot of times people look at the works of other commentators. Let's think about the commentaries. You know, the Spurgeon and some of the other commentaries that Christians look at, and you know, so they look at these to explain the Bible to them. So what the Pharisees did, and if you want to talk about the oral law, because the oral law has been written down now, it's called the Midrash, the Talmud, as the common name for it. Yeah. And so the traditional oral law basically was commentaries on the Old Testament that were written before the time of Jesus and up until I think about the 16 or 1700s, and they were written as commentaries, but a lot of Jewish adherents to Judaism, they read them like they're the gospel, like they're in other words, if a famous rabbi said something, well, that's the explanation for it. And you know, Christians are guilty of it too. You know, I hear more.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you know, I've heard more Christians say, well, you know, Spurgeon said this, and you know, and things like that, and it's like, well, okay, it's no different than a Jewish person saying, well, Rabbi Akiba said this. You know?
Yeah, I suppose I've done that too.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the things that they do is they place the oral law importance above the law of Moses.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's very true.
They place more importance on the oral law.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that it does is that when you add to God's law, it's men assuming the role of God.
Right.
Because when you place more importance on those laws, you're saying these are more important than the law of God. And like, okay, Yahweh said, rest on the Sabbath.
Mm-hmm.
Let's stick with the Sabbath. That's
okay.
What. That was one of the examples given in this teaching. And but the oral law has hundreds of ways to obey the Sabbath.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't do them, you're breaking the law.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's right.
yeah, and you know, those are not God's commandments. Those are traditions of men, commandments of men.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what Yeshua came to earth to do, was to teach the people that these are not God's commandments, people. This is not. And so he constantly broke those commandments all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what was driving the Pharisees crazy. You know, I mean, they were like, you're constantly breaking our laws. You're breaking our laws all the time. You're doing this on the Sabbath. You're healing on the Sabbath. You're eating on the Sabbath. You're walking too far on the Sabbath. You're doing all these things on the Sabbath that you're not supposed to do. And he's saying, hey, I'm not doing anything against the commandments of God. These are your laws I'm breaking.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not breaking God's laws. And it was driving him crazy. And it was just like, he's not obeying us, and he's teaching the people not to obey us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they hated.
Sure.
And they knew they had to get rid of him because he was teaching the people not to obey the Pharisaical laws. And they couldn't handle that because there were a lot of people believing in him and just going back to obeying the law of Moses alone,
mm-hmm.
and not obeying the oral Talmudic laws. And that was not good.
Mm-hmm.
The Pharisees, they didn't like that at all.
That's right. And it's interesting too that since the Pharisees and some of the other great leaders that lived back then were so intent on adhering to oral tradition, it's and I can't prove this, but I just knowing how God works a little bit, I don't think anybody can figure out totally, but He gives us stuff, and if we misuse it, He'll take it away. Yeah. And so the Torah was being ignored by the Pharisees. And so when Yeshua came and he died, and later on in 70 A.D. when the temple was destroyed, you can imagine there's no sacrifice was the main part of Judaism back then, and which it should be today. But at the same time, okay, well, if you're not going to obey my laws and you're going to write your own, well, I'm just going to take them away. And one of the reasons that the oral tradition is so big in Judaism nowadays is because there's no way to obey all 613 commandments. There is no sacrifice.
Right.
There is no Levitical order because the temple's not there anymore. So it had to be replaced by something. It shouldn't have been, but it was. And and so that's why some of these requirements and things that are found in the Talmud is. And some of the things that are mentioned there are totally inane.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you can only imagine that God hears that and he's going, oh no.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, and this is not the way that God wanted to be worshipped.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's almost the same as probably. I don't know. I'm just throwing this out here. To me, maybe it's the same as in Deuteronomy 12:32. Where he says, whatever I command you, be careful to observe it, and you shall not add to it, take away from it. Okay. Right. So, and he says that you don't, or Deuteronomy, here, 12:31. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You shall not worship Yahweh in their way. For every abomination that Yahweh, which he hates, they have done to their gods. For they burn even their sons and daughters in the fire to their gods. Okay. So basically, pagan worship. Okay. Mm-hmm. So he's saying, don't do it. I don't want to be worshipped the way that the pagans worship their gods. Okay.
Right.
Well, if they're making up their own stuff and they're not worshiping God the way he wants to be worshipped, I mean, maybe it's not quote unquote paganism, in the sense that, the pagans are worshiping their gods, but he's being worshipped in a way he said not to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the same? Okay, so is that the same what the church is doing?
In many ways, yes.
I'm just throwing it out there. I'm not, this is not anything, my brain just came up with it right now. So, is that what we're doing?